Thank you, Cassie. Welcome, everyone, to today's Connect with Remedy webinar. This month's topic is Digital Workplace Basic Best Practices. And today we have presenting a senior manager in the Digital Workplace Solutions Department, and his name is Sirjad Parakkat. Go ahead, Sirjad.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. We have a packed agenda today to get started with. So let's get into the agenda for today's topic. So today we are going to be covering the key best practices for implementing digital workplace basic, which includes SRM integration with digital workplace, knowledge management integration, approvals, and how some of the other capabilities like deep linking and notification works. What we will not cover today is the advanced topic related to service broker and the native digital workplace capabilities such as location, service health, and so forth. Right. So let's get into to the topic. And before I get started with each section, digital workplace was formerly called My IT. I'm sure everyone knows it. So in case if we use the term interchangeably, just want to make sure. And the other expectation that we have is, before we dive in, we hope that every attendee knows basic about digital workplace, have seen or used digital workplace, installed it, experienced the features, etc. So let's get into the topic. So the first one is how you can configure the service catalog and some of the best practices that you need to keep in mind for configuring the service catalog. The first one is group-related services into categories. So this is on the SRM side. You need to keep in mind when you create SRDs and categories, make sure that categories, the SRDs are grouped into categories based on the right category. For example, if you have SRDs for let's say phone repair or maybe account lockout or Wi-Fi, make sure that these are all grouped into a same category, like maybe it is under IT services or most common IT service category, so that it becomes easy to map these categories into digital workplace. The second one we wanted to talk about is, or the key point to note when creating the SRDs and the category, is the entitlement part. So when you create entitlement for each service or the category, make sure that you create entitlement based on the correct groups, and it is for the category rather than having extremely complex entitlement. What we mean by that is, let's say you have a group of users who have access to a set of services or SRDs. Then make sure that these are part of a category rather than creating like multiple rules or multiple entitlements, saying that 10 entitlements for 10 services. Instead, create like one entitlement for one for the category, which consists of say 10 entitlements, 10 services, so that it's a simple entitlement. And where this will help is when you access the services from digital workplace, it becomes easy to process these rules rather than going through like multiple entitlements. It goes through just one entitlement or maybe two entitlements, and then process the rules and then get the services for the user. So you will see performance improvements and easy to fetch this data in digital workplace. So these are the two things that you need to keep in mind from the SRM perspective. When you create the SRD, make sure you categorize it correctly on the SRM side, and you create proper entitlement, which is simple and easy to fetch the SRDs for end users. Now, coming to the digital workplace configuration side, the first thing you do for the SRM integration with digital workplace is to configure the SRM provider for digital workplace. And this will basically ask you, your server information and a set of configuration, which we'll go through in the next slide. So once you configure the SRM provider, the next thing you do is you create a catalog section in Digital Workplace Admin Console. And when you create a catalog section in Digital Workplace, this is basically to map the SRDs from SRM into Digital Workplace. So the best practice here is, even though we support mapping different SRDs from different categories, it's better and it's easy and better to manage. And even from a performance perspective, what we recommend is to have a one-to-one mapping, or maybe you can have even, I would say 2 or 3 categories in SRM mapped to one catalog section in Digital Workplace, rather than, creating a catalog section with 10 different SRDs from 10 different categories, right? So what happens is, when you create a catalog section where you bring SRDs from, let's say, 10 or 15 different categories from SRM, and when the user views these SRDs from Digital Workplace client, it's going to take more time to process these different categories and fetch the SRDs from different categories. So what we recommend to customers is to do either a one-to-one mapping if you have the categories defined correctly in SRM, or maybe in some cases you may want to you may have a use case where you wanted to consolidate 2 categories from SRM into one catalog section, or maybe up to 3. So this will help you improve the performance as well. So some of the and when defining the catalog section, the different types of catalog section we usually see customers define as, like, call it as correctly based on the name. You can say IT services, HR services, facilities, marketing, sales, finance, legal, etc. And then map the SRDs correctly with these catalog section. The next one is, again, for the catalog section, you may be having, let's say 25 items or 25 services in a catalog section. Make sure that the most frequently used services are, in the main section or at the top, right, so that it is visible for the users when they log in. Let's say guest Wi-Fi request or VPN access request is the most frequently used service. Make sure that you have that at the top of the catalog section, so that it's easy to find without even going through the search or browsing through categories, so forth. The next point is, make sure you add a good icon for each service, and Digital Workplace allows you to add icons for services. So make sure you work with your your user experience team to build a good icon that aligns or mapped with the service, so that it is easy to find for the end user. Digital Workplace also supports simple survey. What this means is, the survey that Digital Workplace sends out after completion of a service is a one-question survey with smiley face and so forth, which is easy to fill in and get response from the user. So and we have the configuration in Digital Workplace to map this one-question survey for every SRD. So this is another best practice. Make sure you map the simple survey for each service so that you get adequate feedback after completion of the request. We also support the email configuration for notification of service requests. Whenever the status changes or whenever the request is completed. This is something you could use as well. It's a simple email notification service which contains basic information as well as a deep link URL which will take the user directly to the service so that they can view all the status and so forth. We also support the notification using in-app and push notification for mobile device. So make sure you enable these capability for the service request. For all the services which are not frequently used, we recommend you to keep it within the category so that user can, in case if there is a need, user can find it through search or using the browse category option which is present in the catalog page. Moving on to the next slide, which shows you the UI for configuration. The one on the left-hand side is the creation of catalog section, where you can create a catalog with a name, like most common IT requests or most common facility services, etc. And then you can pick the categories. The left-hand side you see is the categories from SRM, and you can map different services to this catalog section. So here, if you have everything created correctly, let's say most common IT request under a category called IT request, or all the network requests under a network category, then you can easily map. You can do a one-to-one mapping of catalog section to an SRM category, and that also will help to bring these data to the end user quickly, rather than mapping it from multiple different categories into multiple different SRM categories into the catalog section. The one on the right-hand side is the survey configuration, where you can map a survey to any request. And what you will see in the survey configuration drop-down is the one question survey that you created in SRM. So once you enable it, it is going to trigger and notify users as soon as the request is completed for feedback. The next screenshot that you see here is the catalog UI on the client, where you will see different catalog section defined as most common IT services, common facilities services, HR services, and so forth. And you can also see icons. For example, if I'm looking for a guest Wi-Fi SRD or guest Wi-Fi request, the icon matches it, right? So it's easy to catch what I'm looking for, rather than without even searching for this information. It is also at the top because it is one of the most frequently used service in this example. Moving on, the next one is about on behalf of functionality, which is part of the digital workplace. The key difference between the on behalf of functionality in digital workplace for SRM and the one which is available in SRM is SRM uses OBO as impersonation, whereas in digital workplace, the OBO is based on the requested by user, who is a logged in user. So whatever, let's say I logged into digital workplace, I wanted to submit an on behalf of request for my colleague, then whatever request that I am entitled to, I will be able to submit an on behalf of request. Whereas in SRM, SRM has the impersonation capability where I can impersonate as my colleague, provided I have permission, and then I will be able to see all the services based on my colleague's entitlement. So that's the key difference. We also have a few configuration for search optimization of on behalf of functionality. The first one is OBO.enable for all. All these properties or the configuration is part of the SRM provider. And if you set this as true, let's say you have, we have seen that different organizations have different rules for OBO. But if your organization has a standard rule which says that anybody can submit on behalf of anyone, then we highly recommend you to enable this configuration setting. What this does is it's actually going to bypass all the OBO rules and go directly to the people form and search for the user record for the OBO request. So this will improve the search performance as well. So, but again, keep in mind that this rule is only applicable if you have a rule in your organization which says that anybody can submit on behalf of anyone. If not, then you will have to set this rule to false, and by default it is set to false. The other rule is for the wildcard search. So if you want to do to enable wildcard search on OBO, you'll have to set this property OBO search prefix wildcard to true. This is also false by default. We also have another property which is to transform the search case. So by default, the OBO search in digital workplace support, searching the first name, last name, login ID, and the email ID. The thought here is the user who is submitting on behalf of request, he or she knows the user's first name or last name, login ID, or the email ID. These are the unique fields that the user will know. And in some cases where you may be having in your people form, you may have let's say the email ID or the first name, last name, everything is stored in uppercase by default. And but from an end user perspective, the user does not know about this, and they may type it in uppercase or lowercase. Now, if you want to transform that, you could do that using the third property that we have here called OBO search transform search term case to upper or lower. By default, it is none. It's non-transform. So if you want to do that, you can set this property as well. And all these configuration settings are part of the SRM provider configuration. This is the screenshot for the SRM provider configuration, so we'll cover that as part of the next topic, which is AIF. So we do support AIF for AIF as an SRD type in digital workplace, and what it does is it opens the AIF, the mid-tier view of the AIF in digital workplace in an iframe by default, so that you are launching it within digital workplace and you can navigate through it. You can submit the request. As soon as you submit the request, it takes you back to the digital workplace. Now, in some cases, we have seen that users have pretty complicated or complex AIF, which has large screen with too many controls in it and so forth. And we have seen rendering issues on iframe. So in those cases, it is recommended to launch the AIF in a new window as opposed to the iframe, which is within the digital workplace UI. So when you in those cases, what we recommend is to launch it in a new window. And what happens when you launch it in a new window is it shows exactly how it shows in SRM. And you will not see any issues with different controls, or if you have a complex AIF, you won't see any navigation issues and so forth if you open it in a new window. So to make this configuration, by default it shows up in the iframe. So if you want to change that, we have a property in the SRM provider configuration which is called Open AIF in new window. And you can set this to true. Excuse me. which will open the AIF in a new window. Now this is the configuration, the provider configuration screenshot. You can also see another one, another property here called skip fulfillment. This is basically when you create a request, there is an underlying fulfillment process, right, which is either an incident or work order or change or anything. What happens is when you submit the request, default, it waits for the request to get created, and it waits for the fulfillment to get created. So for the end user to see the response back that your request has been submitted, it takes a longer time. So in order to avoid that, we have a configuration called skip fulfillment. What it does is, as soon as the request is submitted to SRM, it shows you a message to the end user saying that the request has been submitted. It still goes and goes through the processing of the fulfillment and so forth. So that's all done in the background, but the end user does not have to wait for the confirmation, right? It's something which is processing in the background. So you can configure this if you want to make sure that, no, I mean, for me, more than performance, what is really important is to make sure that the fulfillment process goes through and it creates the right fulfillment record. Then you may want to, set this property to false. Then it will always wait for the fulfillment fulfillment record to get created, and then send the message back to the end user. But in majority of the cases, what we have seen is, customers, the end user want an immediate response, and in that case, as soon as the request is submitted, within a second, I wanted to see a response which says that the request has been submitted, and whatever is happening behind the scenes, the end user does not have to know. So in that case, you can set the skip fulfillment property to true. The Meteor URL that you see in the provider configuration is for to launch the AIFs if you have AIFs in an organization, and the external icon is if you want to use the icons from SRM as opposed to the one that we have in Digital Workplace. The next one is when you move from SRM to Digital Workplace, we have seen customers using different approaches to roll out this Digital Workplace as a new application. Some customers, they do in phases, right? So what they say is, I wanted to take only new services that we created recently into Digital Workplace, and everything else let the users use SRM for a short period of time, and then see how the adoption and uptake is, and based on that, I'll slowly move everything into Digital Workplace. So in those kind of scenarios, we have a configuration in Digital Workplace to only show a set of SRDs in Digital Workplace. Let's say you have some, you just wanted to expose only 10 of them in the beginning of the rollout, then you could do so using this configuration, which sets the visibility of the SRD in the client app. The client app here is the Digital Workplace client. And the same screen also allows you to change the icon for the SRD. The next one is about disabling the browse categories option in Digital Workplace. So out of the box, we have in the main section of Digital Workplace, we have the search, and on the left-hand side of the search, we have a category section where you can browse through each category to find the services or the SRDs that you're looking for. But let's say a customer thinks that the category option is not really needed, where I have whatever the SRDs that I have, it is all defined correctly in the catalog section, and the ones that are not frequently used, user can find it through search. then you could disable the browse category using this property. The first one you see here is the tenant ID. By default, it is 1. .browse categories enabled SRM. You can set it to true or false. So if you set this to false, then the browse categories will not show up in the client view. So the reason why we have the tenant ID here is this also supports multi-tenancy. So if you have a service provider use case where you are enabling digital workplace for multiple companies, then you could configure this per company, which is why you have it as a tenant specific configuration. And this should go into the connect.properties file of digital workplace. The next one is another configuration which we have not exposed much because most of the customers uses the default filter view. But in case, in some case, let's say your use case is that you have users who logs into digital workplace not so often, maybe once a month or so. So the average request that they have in their timeline is at any given point is, let's say, less than 10. In those kind of cases, the timeline view of digital workplace, by default, it shows the requests that are in progress, and then you have to use the filter option to select different statuses like completed and closed and canceled and so forth to show or to view the old request. But in case if you want to show all the requests by default, all the ones irrespective of the status, you can use this this configuration setting to set everything to true, which is called enable all SR status filter by default equal to true. And this goes into config.json file. We have not seen many customers using this, but again, this really depends on your use case. If you have, if you are an organization where service request is heavily used and every user will have, let's say, an average of 50 or more requests at any given point of time, then probably this is not something you wanted to enable because it becomes, it'll be difficult to find what they are looking for if everything is on the timeline with the different statuses, as opposed to the default view, which has only the in-progress request, which is what the users generally, will care. All right, moving to the next section. So that pretty much completes the basic configuration that you need to keep in mind for SRM integration. Moving on, the next topic is knowledge management and digital workplace integration with knowledge management. So digital workplace supports different types of articles coming from the Remedy knowledge management. Start with how to, non-error, problem, reference, and custom templates. And we also show similar articles and related articles in the article view when you search for an article and then view it. What we don't support is any other types other than these, like decision tree, for example, which is not supported in digital workplace. So this is the typical view of the article. Once you search for the article, you will also see on the right hand side similar articles that matches the keyword, as well as related articles that you have already defined as related article in RKM. Now coming to the configuration part of RKM, there's not too much. It is pretty easy to configure. So we have two providers for RKM configuration. One is the Digital Workplace RKM provider, and the second is the knowledge provider, which is used by both Digital Workplace and Smart IT. So which is why we have two providers. And some of the functionality of RKM, it is needed for both Digital Workplace as well as Smart IT, which is why we are using the knowledge provider for Digital Workplace as well. So you need to make sure that both of these providers are enabled to work with knowledge management in digital workplace. So you configure when you configure the RKM provider, there is an option to configure the template. So for example, you don't want to use all the different types of articles that the digital workplace supports, such as how-to, non-error, problem reference, etc. And let's say you wanted to expose only the how-to articles in digital workplace, you could do so by configuring the RKM templates in the RKM provider section. By default, it has all the templates names defined. Let's say you want only RKM how-to template, you can configure that here and remove everything else. The second property here is the RKM search result option, which is when you search for an article, whether you wanted to see the words highlighted or the excerpts highlighted, etc. So you could configure this. By default, it is set to none. So you could switch this to either Word or Excel. So that's another configuration. And we also support adding a catalog section for articles. So what we recommend is, create a catalog section for the top articles so that it's easy to find out from digital workplace. Along with this, there is the typical use case that we see is a user comes in and then looking for an information, let's say wanted to configure VPN, so without submitting the request, you have an article which is at in the top catalog section list, which talks about how to configure VPN, and then you use that article to configure the VPN by yourself without help from the the IT or the help desk. And in case if you cannot, then at the end of the article there is a deep link URL which says if you still need additional help, create a request, right? Which takes you automatically to the VPN request SRD, and then you can submit that request. That's a typical use case we see customers using it. Another point to keep in mind is what we show in digital workplace is only published and externally visible articles. We do not show any internal articles or articles of type draft or any other types which is other than published. The next one is about the search result set, which is applicable for SRM as well as RKM. So by default, in the search view, when you search for something, what you see is in digital workplaces, it goes after every data sources or the providers that are configured in digital workplace, and then searches for the keyword or the information that you're looking for, retrieve the result and show it in digital workplace. What we did is we have filtered these results into top 25 from each section or each data source. Let's say you're searching for, I want to know what is the nearest printer, right? Or I want to know how to configure the printer. We pick that keyword and then search against different data sources that is configured in digital workplace. Let's say in this case SRM and RKM. There are other data sources that you can configure, but in this case, let's say it's just RKM and SRM, and then we look for the information, retrieve the top 25 SRDs as well as the top 25 RKM articles, and then group it and render it in digital workplace. Now, for whatever reason, let's say you think that it's the top 25 results are not enough, and there are more useful information if we can show, let's say, top 50 records or top 30 or 40, whatever that number is. You can configure it using this property, which is called unicatalog total results. By default, it is set to 25. You can configure it to any number you want. But the thought process behind this is why we made it as 25 by default is that in all the testing, the user experience testing that we have seen is users won't go beyond the top 10 or top 15 records or top 20 records when they're searching for information. If they can't find it, right, then the next thing they do is they're not going to search for articles. They just go and submit the request. If the information that they are looking for is, let's say, beyond top 20 or top 25, then most of the case, or most likely, they go and submit an IT request stating I need help here. So which is why we set it to top 25 per data source, but it is highly configurable. Another point to note specific to the RKM is when it comes to localization of articles, make sure that you have the fields of the articles localized in RKM source field extension form. Otherwise, what happens is the fields will be displayed in the default language, which is English. And we keep hearing this from customers that when I'm looking for a non-English article, the fields are not translated into the right locale. And the reason is because these fields are not translated in the RKM source field extension form. So that's pretty much about the RKM configuration for Digital Workplace. The next one, or the next topic, is about approvals. So Digital Workplace supports all the types of approvals that are available in Approval Central, namely, SRM, change, RKM, release, procurement, and custom approvals. So we support all of them, and by default, you will see all the different types of approvals in Digital Workplace on all the clients. But there are differences that you need to be aware of. So for SRM type of approvals, we show all the information about the request. Say somebody is submitting a request, it goes for approval. The approver will see all the information from the request, like all the question answers, who requested, and attachment, everything which is part of the request. So we show all the details. When it comes to change requests, we have only few fields that we show, which we think is the commonly used fields or useful information. What does this change about, description of the change, and in some cases you define a change template which has a lot of information. In those cases we won't get everything from it. What we have is we do support attachment as part of the change approval request. So, and what we've seen is in most of the cases we see that the attachment contains a lot more information about the change. So if attachment is part of the change approval, then the approver can view that attachment and then see all the details of the change. So it doesn't bring all the fields from the change. It has only some fields. I'll give you a view as well of the change. I have a screenshot of that, and that I'll show you. For all other types of approvals like RKM, release, procurement, and custom, it's a very basic view which has the basic approval information or the request information without details. In case we have heard some customers say that that's not good enough to make judgment on whether to approve or reject the request from Digital Workplace. And some customers have even asked for configuring this so that we can hide these different approval types in Digital Workplace. We do have those options, which I'll talk about in a moment. So this is the view we have for SRM-based approval request. For example, you can see all the details of the approval. By default, you see the main view in the timeline, which also includes where the approval is, who the approver is, pending with, and the details of the request, the service request. Now, when it comes to the change, this is the view where you can see the change request, it has the request ID, the description, what is the affected service, who's the change manager, risk, and the number of CIs involved, etc. Beyond this, any other fields that are there in change, we don't expose that in digital workplace. But like I said, what we support is attachment, where if all the details of the change are part of the attachment, then it goes to the approver, and approver can view that from digital workplace. For all the other ones, let's say you wanted to configure it and for some reason you wanted to hide them from digital workplace and show, let's say, only service request and change based approval, we have a configuration option which is called approvals.enable approvals, and you can define here different types of approval requests. So let's say by default you wanted to show only change and service request based approvals. You can say service underscore request, comma, change. This will only show the service request and change based approval on all the digital workplace clients. Okay, moving on. So that pretty much covers the approval topic. The next one is about deep links and email notification links. So deep links is a new concept that we have in digital workplace, where you have the ability to create a direct URL to a specific service request or a category or a catalog section that you defined in digital workplace, or knowledge articles. So for example, let's say someone is asking for, hey, how do I configure VPN? And to you, somebody's asking you this question, and you're like, okay, that information is there in digital workplace. Okay, how do I find it? Can you send me? I don't know where the digital workplace is. I don't know how to access it, right? Can you send me a link? Instead of sending the application link, right, the user is asking for a specific information here. So you could create a deep link URL for, let's say, VPN request knowledge article or VPN request SRD, and then send this to your colleague or whoever asked the question. And when they click onto the link, it takes them directly to the object, in this case, either a KA or SRD, and then they can go through the article or submit the request directly. This is where the deep linking will help, basically to share the exact resource information. We also use the deep linking for email notification. When you get a service request notification or any other notifications that are supported by digital workplace, it will take the user directly to that specific request. And that capability is enabled using the deep linking. And today, we support deep linking for SRDs and categories, catalog section, knowledge articles. And as far as the email notification is concerned, we, specific to the digital workplace basic, we support the email notification for service requests and social events, which are also part of the digital workplace basic, which is basically if you post something or if you tag a user in a microblog or in a post. The other one that I mentioned here are more on the advanced side, but it's part of the email notification feature. Now, some of the configurations related to the notification is, let's say we also have in-app and push notification for all these different notifications that we talked about, email, and let's say you are not using mobile app today and you wanted to disable the push notification service, you could do so by using this configuration property, which is called push notification feature enabled. by default it is enabled, so you can set it to false, and this should be set in connect.properties file. The next one is the in-app notification. For whatever reason, if you want to, by default it is enabled, so users can see in-app notification in the UI, at the top of the UI at the bell icon. If you want to, let's say, disable it, you could do so using this property in-app notification feature enabled to false, which will disable globally for all users. And these are the different notification types that we support in Digital Workplace. So for service request, status change, we support push notification and email notification. For service request comments, we support in-app, push, and email notification. And for approvals, we support in-app and push notification. So these are the different notifications type for different use cases that we support. And that pretty much covers the presentation. Here are some references to the documentation where you have this information available. That pretty much, covers the presentation and the best practices for Digital Workplace Basic. So to summarize, we talked about the first one we talked about is SRM integration with Digital Workplace, where we talked about how you can group the services and add entitlements, and how you can create catalog section and map the SRDs in the catalog section. For knowledge articles, we talked about how you can configure it, and what we show in the knowledge section, from the knowledge articles and the different types of knowledge articles that we support, such as how-tos, known errors, problem reference, custom, etc., and how you can configure some of the search options for knowledge articles. So we talked about that as well, and then we talked about approvals, where we talked about the different types of approvals and the details that Digital Workplace supports. So service request and change has service request has all the information. Service request based approvals, it has all the information, and for change it has most of the information with the ability to add attachment. For all other types, it's basic approval information. And we talked about how you can configure it, and if you want to disable some of the approval types, how you can do that. The next one we talked about is deep linking and the different features in Digital Workplace that supports deep linking. And the email notification part, in what cases we support email notification. We also talked about the push notification, how you can configure it, and the in-app notification configuration. So those are that was the last topic that we talked about, where how you can configure the notification, either a push or email or in-app. So that concludes the session. I think we'll move on to the Q&A part of the session. Thank you, everyone. Steve, back to you.
Hey, thanks, Sirjad. Yeah, I do have about 4 questions lined up. So just a reminder for those on the phone, if you do have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A section of the WebEx event. First question, Sirjad, is can I use AIF on mobile devices?
Good question. No, AIFs are not supported on mobile client. It is only on web client, like I said, and it's only a view where we display the exact AIF either in an iframe or in a new tab with, on the browser. So it's not supported on mobile clients.
Great, thank you. Next question is, can I mark a service as a favorite?
No, we don't have the favorite option available in Digital Workplace, but it is something part of the roadmap, and it is something actually it's coming in the upcoming release. So right now we don't support favorites, but that is something we are looking at to implement in the near future.
Great, thanks. Next question is, can I save my service as a draft?
No. So another good question. So draft is another functionality which is not supported by Digital Workplace today, but it is part of the roadmap. So you will see that coming in the future release.
All right, and this is the last question that I have lined up. Is Deep Link similar to a user creating favorites in their web browser?
It is similar to user creating a favorite in the web browser. That's correct. Yeah. So you can go directly to that web page that you're looking for. Yes. So if you can create a deep link and then let's say mark it as your favorite, then when you click onto it, it takes you directly to that request. Yes.
All right, we'll just pause for a moment to see if there's any questions in the Q&A section.
Thank you. So I think the three questions that you asked, I think those are really important, because as far as AIFs are concerned, our recommendation is to convert them to standard SRDs, and we know that a lot of customers have done it. And 80 to 85% of the use cases which are in AIF can be converted using the standard SRD question types, so which is what we recommend, and we have no plans to implement AIFs for mobile. So which is why we have it only on the web client. But for the other two functionalities like the favorites and draft, it's not there in the current product, but that's something we are looking to implement in the near future.
Okay, Sirjad, I do have another question, and if you need me to repeat it, let me know, and I'll ask it again. But here it is. When enable.obo.4.all equals false, what rules does DWP utilize to determine whether a user can request OBO? Can this be used to determine which users someone can request on behalf of?
So it is, yeah. So then in that case, it goes through the OBO rules for the user, and then process based on the users on behalf of permission, right? So I have, let's say, I as a user have permission to submit on behalf of my colleague or my manager. Then it uses that rule to request on behalf of, yep. So it basically goes through the OBO rules which are present in SRM and then honor those rules. So, but let's say you have all these rules configured in SRM, but at the same time you also have another rule which kind of overrides, saying anybody can submit on behalf of anyone. Then instead of going through all these rules, it's better to override or avoid all these and then go directly to the people form and then look for the user information. Yeah. Hope that answers.
Yeah. Thank you. The next question is a change password feature available in the current version?
No, we don't have an option to change password from Digital Workplace. The reason is that what we have seen is most of the customers uses SSO solution, and it integrates with either IDP or Kerberos. In that case, the password management is completely outside of Digital Workplace, and it is used by every other application and not just Digital Workplace. So we don't have that capability available in Digital Workplace.
Next question is, we really would like deep links for approval in MyIT. Will it be available in a future release?
Deep linking for approval, we don't have it, but that's something we are looking to implement. One thing we do have is in the approval notification, especially if you're using mobile, the notification will take you directly to, so you get a push notification, and as soon as you tap onto the notification, it takes you directly to the approval request, which is actually through a deep link. But that capability is not yet exposed into an email notification because we don't have email notification for approval yet. But yeah, that's something we are looking to implement in the future.
Great, thanks. I'm just getting the next question ready here. One moment. Within the admin console, the main menu is displayed in an actual menu instead of displayed across the top. Is this possible to configure for the universal catalog?
Can you say that question again?
Absolutely. Within the admin console, the main menu is displayed in an actual menu instead of displayed across the top. Is this possible to configure for the universal catalog?
No, it's not. It's not possible to configure that for the catalog. The menu is actually displayed at the top for the client, and that cannot be configured to display. I think you're asking to show it on the left-hand side, right? Yeah, that option is not available.
Okay, at this point, I don't have any other questions. We'll go ahead and make this a last call for any questions that you may have for Sirjad or our panelists. So I'll just wait a moment. Okay, I do have one more question here, and you may need, okay. So the browse category only displays for non-support user profiles and not support users. Is this as designed?
No, can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, the browse category only displays for non-support user profiles and not support users. Is this as designed?
No, it's not as designed. It should display for all users based on their permission. By default, it should display for everyone, and then with respect to the category, again, it depends on the user's entitlement, right? If the users are entitled to the SRDs within the category, then it displays. Otherwise, it should display everything to every user, provided they have the right permission. Yeah.
So we would recommend maybe submitting a support ticket with support.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Very good. All right. Since there are no further questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up the live Q&A section. And thank you. Here's various ways to contact BMC via BMC Communities, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and of course the methods of getting a hold of BMC technical support. Thank you everyone for your attendance and participation. Today's recording along with its Q&A will be posted to the BMC Communities within 1 week from today. Take care and have a great rest of your week.